My termination letter was already printed when I walked into that meeting. I know this because I saw it. Face down on Raymond's desk, my name visible through the paper. He didn't know I could read upside down. I had been doing it in meetings for 3 years. Every budget sheet, every proposal, every memo he slid away when I walked in. I had read all of them. I sat down, crossed my legs, and folded my hands on the table. There were 4 other people in the room. Donna from HR, who wouldn't meet my eyes. Pete from finance, who kept clicking his pen. And Sasha, my so-called teammate, who sat just a little too comfortably in her chair, like she already knew exactly how this was going to go. Raymond cleared his throat. Nora, he said, we've been doing a full review of roles across the floor. And after careful consideration, we've decided to restructure your position. Restructure. That word. So clean. So professional. Like it didn't mean anything at all. Your current responsibilities will be redistributed to the wider team. You'll be moving into a general support role, effective Monday. He slid the paper across the table. I looked at it. Then I looked at him. Okay, I said. Just that. One word. And I watched something flicker behind his eyes. Surprise. Then relief. Then the faintest trace of disappointment, like he had been hoping I would cry. I didn't cry. I had been ready for this moment for 6 weeks. Let me take you back to where this really started, because it didn't start in that conference room. It started on a Tuesday morning 18 months earlier, when I saved the Callaway account and nobody knew it was me. I had been at Vila Style, a mid-size fashion retail company, for 2 years at that point. I ran the brand partnerships division. Not managed. Ran. There is a difference. Managing means you oversee. Running means when something breaks at 11 at night, you are the one who fixes it, alone, with cold coffee and no overtime pay. Callaway was our biggest account. A boutique chain with 12 locations that trusted us to handle their seasonal campaigns. In February of that year, we nearly lost them. Their regional director sent a termination notice over a campaign that had gone sideways. Wrong imagery, wrong tone, a complete mismatch with their brand. Raymond panicked. I watched him pace his office like a man on fire. I went home that night and rebuilt the entire campaign proposal from scratch. New concept, new visuals direction, new messaging that actually matched what Callaway stood for. I worked until 2 in the morning and sent it to Raymond at 6 a.m. with one line, use this. He did. Callaway stayed. The company celebrated. Raymond stood in the all-hands meeting that Friday and smiled like a man who had personally parted the sea. He never said my name once. I told myself it was fine. It wasn't fine. But I told myself it was. The thing about being overlooked is that it sneaks up on you slowly. It doesn't happen all at once. It happens in tiny moments that you almost talk yourself out of noticing. Raymond started copying me out of emails. Not all at once. First it was just the external ones, the ones that went to partners and vendors. He said it was to streamline communication. I believed him. Then it was the strategy meetings. He started holding them before I arrived and summarizing them for me afterward. He said it was because I had too much on my plate. I believed that too. I was very good at believing things that were convenient. Then one afternoon I was leaving the office late and I heard Raymond on the phone in his office. The door wasn't fully closed. I wasn't trying to listen. But I heard 3 words that stopped me cold. Her ideas work. Not our ideas. Not the team's ideas. Her ideas. Said in a low voice, like a confession. Like he was telling someone something he didn't want to say out loud. I stood in that hallway for a full 10 seconds. Then I walked to the elevator, pressed the button, and stood there very still while everything I had been ignoring for months rearranged itself into a picture I could no longer pretend wasn't there. He knew. He had always known. The work was mine, and he was using every single piece of it. I didn't do anything rash. I want you to understand that. Every part of me wanted to walk back into that office and say something I couldn't take back. But I had watched enough people blow up their careers in moments of pure emotion to know that rage without a plan is just noise. So I went home. I made dinner. I sat at my kitchen table and I thought, if I confronted Raymond directly, he would deny everything. He had the title, the relationships, and the reputation. I had none of those things officially. Anything I said would sound like a bitter employee grasping for credit. If I went to HR without evidence, same result. Maybe worse. So I decided to do something that went against every instinct I had. I decided to wait. But waiting didn't mean doing nothing. Waiting meant watching. Waiting meant documenting. Every email I sent that he later presented as his thinking, I started saving. Every strategy deck I built that appeared in his presentation slightly reworded, I kept a copy. I created a folder on my personal laptop and I named it simply Record. I told nobody, not even Carla, who sat next to me and was the closest thing I had to a friend in that office. Not yet. I just kept working, kept delivering, kept being exactly what I had always been. And I started paying very close attention. 6 weeks before that meeting, something shifted. A woman named Brooke joined the company as a senior brand consultant. She had been brought in by the executive team to assess the partnerships division, my division, ahead of a potential expansion. I found out about it the same way I found out most things Raymond didn't want me to know, by reading upside down. I saw her name on a scheduling document on his desk when I dropped off a report. Brooke Calloway, senior consultant. Week-long review starting March 3rd. He never told me. He introduced her to the team as someone who was looking at growth opportunities across the floor. He sat her next to Pete from finance during the walkthrough. He gave her a tour of the department and pointed at things I had built, like a man showing off a house he bought but never cleaned. What Raymond didn't know was that Brooke and I had already met. 3 years earlier, at an industry mixer in the city, we had sat at the same table for 2 hours talking about brand strategy and the state of retail fashion. She remembered me. I remembered her. When she saw me across the office that first morning, something passed across her face. Recognition. Then something sharper. Like a question forming. I gave her the smallest nod. She gave me one back. And I thought, there it is. Brooke requested a one-on-one with each team member as part of her review. Standard practice. Raymond scheduled them all personally. Mine was the last one on the list, the shortest slot, 30 minutes on a Friday afternoon. Like an afterthought. I came prepared anyway. I didn't bring complaints. I didn't bring accusations. I brought work. Specifically, I brought a quiet portfolio of everything I had produced in the last 18 months, original drafts, timestamps, email chains showing my thinking before it became Raymond's presentation. I didn't frame it as evidence. I framed it as context. I just want you to have the full picture of what the division has been doing, I told her. Brooke sat across from me and looked through every page slowly. She didn't rush. She didn't speak for a long time. When she finally looked up, her expression was very careful. How long have you been running point on the Calloway account? She asked. Since the beginning, I said. And the Voss campaign? The 9 West collaboration? The regional strategy that went to the board last quarter? All mine, I said. I can show you the original files if that helps. She closed the portfolio. It helps, she said quietly. She left that Friday. I went back to my desk and kept working like nothing had happened. The demotion came exactly 9 days after Brooke's visit. I have thought about the timing many times since then. 9 days. That tells me Raymond got nervous the moment Brooke left. That tells me he saw something in her face when she looked at him that scared him. That tells me he knew exactly what she had found, even if he didn't know she had found it from me. His solution was to move me out of the way before I became a problem. The support role they gave me had no accounts, no strategy, no decision-making. I would be reviewing shipment invoices and assisting the team with administrative tasks. It was designed to make me invisible, to make me feel small enough to either quit quietly or stop mattering to anyone paying attention. Sasha was announced as the new lead of brand partnerships. Sasha, who had been at the company for 11 months. Sasha, who once asked me how to format a pivot table. Sasha, who I later found out had been feeding Raymond information about my frustrations for the better part of a year. That part stung. I will not pretend it didn't. But I looked at my new desk in the corner. I sat down. I pulled up the invoice spreadsheet. And in a notebook I kept in my bag, I wrote, Day 1. Here is what nobody tells you about being demoted. The people who did it to you start watching you very carefully afterward. They are waiting for you to react. They want the outburst, the tears, the angry resignation letter, because all of those things make you the problem. All of those things shift the story away from what they did and onto how you responded. Raymond walked past my new desk 3 times that first Monday. He never stopped, but I felt him watching. I gave him nothing. I did my invoice work. I answered every request from the team with a smile that cost me more than I can describe. I ate lunch at my desk. I left on time. I did not complain to a single person in that building. But every evening, I went home and I worked. I reached out to Brooke through LinkedIn. Professional, brief, no drama. I told her I appreciated the conversation and attached a condensed version of my portfolio with a note. If you're ever looking for someone with a real knowledge of this space, I'd welcome the conversation. She replied in 4 hours. We set up a call for Thursday evening. I didn't sleep much that week. Not from anxiety, from focus. There is a difference between those two things, and I had finally learned to tell them apart. Brooke was not just a consultant. I learned this on that Thursday call. She was a founding partner at a boutique brand strategy firm called Lumen & Company. They worked with mid-size fashion and retail companies, exactly the space I had spent 3 years mastering. She had taken the consulting engagement with Vela Style because a mutual contact had mentioned the company's partnerships division was doing interesting work. She had wanted to see it herself. What she found instead was a division being propped up by someone whose name was never on anything official. I spent 2 days after our meeting going through the board presentations from the last year, she told me on the call. Nora, I don't want to upset you, but I have to be direct. The strategy in those presentations is not Raymond's thinking. I know his work from 2 other engagements. This is different. It's sharper. It's more human. I was quiet for a moment. I know, I said. I thought you might, she said. Then she asked me the question that changed everything. What would you do if you had your own table? I had thought about this. I had thought about it for months in the back of my mind, where I kept the things I was too afraid to say out loud. I'd built something that actually lasts, I said. Good answer, said Brooke. Let's talk about that. Over the next 3 weeks, I lived 2 lives. During the day, I was the quiet support staff in the corner. I filed invoices. I proofread copy nobody important read. I refilled the supply cabinet when it ran low. I said good morning and goodbye, and nothing in between that could be used against me. I was so unremarkable that people stopped looking at me altogether. At night, I was building. Brooke and I spoke every 2 days. She was putting together a proposal for a new division at Lumen & Co., a retail brand partnerships vertical, and she wanted someone to lead it from the inside out. Not manage it. Build it. The same way I had built Raymond's division. Except this time my name would be on everything. She was offering me a director-level role. Twice my current salary. Full creative control. I told her I needed 3 more weeks. She asked why. I told her I wasn't finished yet. Back in the office, things were already starting to crack. Sasha had taken over my accounts, and the pressure was showing. She missed a deadline on the Callaway account, a small one, but Callaway noticed. She sent a campaign brief to the wrong vendor. She asked me twice, quietly, how I used to handle certain situations. I helped her both times, not because I owed her anything, because I needed the story to tell itself without my fingerprints on the ending. The call from Callaway's regional director came on a Wednesday. I know this because I was sitting 4 feet from Sasha's desk when her phone rang and I watched her face go from confident to pale in about 30 seconds. She didn't know I was listening. I had gotten very good at being present without being noticed. Callaway wanted to speak to the person who had managed their account from the beginning. They had questions about the direction of the upcoming summer campaign. They felt the recent communication had been inconsistent and they wanted clarity. Sasha knocked on Raymond's door immediately after. I went back to my invoices. Raymond handled the call himself. I heard his voice through the glass, steady, reassuring, all the right words. He was good at that part. Performing calm in the middle of a crisis. What he was not good at was actually solving the crisis, because solving it required knowing the account deeply, and he didn't. What followed over the next week was a quiet disaster. The summer campaign direction Sasha submitted was generic, flat. It had none of the brand specificity that had kept Callaway loyal for 2 years. Their director sent back a response that, by all accounts, was polite but devastating. Raymond called a team meeting. He looked around the room, and for just a second, his eyes landed on me. I looked back at him calmly. Then I looked down at my notebook. Carla found me in the break room on a Thursday afternoon. Carla had been at Vela Style for 9 years. She had seen 3 managers come and go. She kept her head down, did clean work, and noticed everything. We had always had a quiet understanding, the kind that doesn't need a lot of words. She sat across from me with her coffee and looked at me for a long moment. "You're not just sitting here, are you?" she said. It wasn't a question. I looked at her. "I'm drinking my coffee," I said. She almost smiled. "Right." She was quiet for a moment. "Raymond had HR adjust your performance file last month, before the restructuring. I saw the paperwork on Donna's desk by accident. It wasn't good, Nora. He changed things." I felt something go cold and still inside me. "What kind of things?" I asked. "Ratings. Notes. There was a comment about you being resistant to feedback. Another one about missed targets." She paused. "None of it matched the reviews you actually received." I held my coffee cup with both hands. "Thank you," I said quietly. "Be careful," she said. "I will," I said. But what I was really thinking was that this was the piece I had been missing. The falsified performance record explained everything. Why HR sat in that meeting without blinking, why the demotion had documentation behind it, why it had all looked so clean and official. Raymond had built a paper trail designed to bury me. I went home that night and added a new section to my folder. I want to be honest about something. There was a night during all of this when I almost gave up. Not gave up on the plan. Gave up on the idea that any of it was worth the weight I was carrying. I sat in my apartment on a Friday night with my laptop open and my evidence folder in front of me, and I felt the full exhaustion of it all crash into me at once. 3 years. 3 years of early mornings and late nights and brilliant work that bore someone else's name. 3 years of being professional when I wanted to scream. 3 years of telling myself to be patient, be smart, be strategic, while people who did a fraction of my work got credit, titles, and praise. I closed the laptop. I called my older sister, Anne. She lives in Portland and she knows me better than anyone. I didn't tell her everything. I just told her I was tired, and I didn't know if what I was doing was worth it. She was quiet for a moment. Then she said something our mother used to say. "You don't build for the people who overlooked you. You build for the version of yourself that deserved better from the beginning." I sat with that for a long time after we hung up. Then I opened the laptop again. For weeks after my demotion, Brooke sent me a message that changed the timeline. Lumen & Co. had just been approached by Callaway directly. Callaway's parent group was looking for an external brand strategy firm to take over their retail campaign management. They were unhappy with their current arrangement. They wanted someone who understood their brand at a deep level. Brooke wanted to pitch for the account. She wanted me to lead the pitch. There was only one condition. I needed to be officially at Lumen & Co. before the pitch meeting, which was scheduled for 5 weeks out. That meant I needed to resign from Vela Style within the next 10 days. I read the message 3 times. Then I thought about Raymond, about Sasha, about Donna sitting in that meeting not meeting my eyes, about the falsified performance notes Carla had described, about 3 years of work that had made other people look brilliant. I thought about Anne's voice on the phone. I thought about the version of me that deserved better from the beginning. I opened a new document and started writing 2 things simultaneously. My resignation letter and a formal complaint to Vela Styles' parent company HR division, not the local HR, not Donna, but the corporate oversight team 2 levels above Raymond's head. I had done my research. I knew exactly who to send it to. The complaint was 12 pages long. I want you to understand what those 12 pages contained, because this is the part where people sometimes assume I did something aggressive or underhanded. I did not. Every single page was documentation I had collected honestly over 18 months. Emails with timestamps, original strategy documents with metadata showing my authorship, side-by-side comparisons of my drafts and Raymond's presentations, The performance file discrepancy Carla had described, which I cross-referenced with my actual review records that I had saved copies of. I included the Callaway situation, the account I had personally rebuilt 18 months earlier, the one that had been credited entirely to Raymond in the board presentation that followed. I included the Voss campaign, the 9 West collaboration, 7 documented instances of work that had been presented to senior leadership as Raymond's strategy. And at the end, I included one simple statement. Not angry, not dramatic, just clear. I am not filing this complaint out of bitterness. I am filing it because the record should be accurate and because what was done to my performance file was not an oversight. It was intentional. I have attached the evidence. I will make myself available for any formal review. I sent it on a Tuesday evening at 7 p.m. Then I went to bed and slept better than I had in months. I resigned the next morning. I printed my letter, walked to Raymond's office, knocked twice, and handed it to him in person. I wanted to see his face, not out of cruelty. I just needed to close that chapter with my eyes open. He read it once, then again. 2 weeks' notice, he said. 1 week, I said. I haven't used leave that covers the second. He looked up at me. Something was moving behind his eyes that I couldn't fully read. It might have been anger. It might have been the beginning of fear. I wasn't sure yet. Is there anything you want to say? He asked. And I realized he was genuinely asking. Like he was bracing for the moment I finally said what I knew. I looked at him for a long moment. I learned a lot here, I said. I hope the team does well. I walked back to my desk. Sasha watched me from across the room. Her expression was unreadable. I gave her a small nod and turned to my screen. I had 1 week left in that building. I spent it being exactly what I had always been, thorough, professional, and completely unremarkable. On my last day, Carla hugged me in the break room. I don't know what you did, she whispered, but I hope it works. It already has, I told her. I started at Lumen & Co. on a Monday. My title was Director of Retail Brand Partnerships. My office had a window. My name was on the door from day one. Not a nameplate they promised to get around to, but an actual engraved sign that Brooke had put up herself the Friday before I arrived. That detail sounds small. It wasn't small to me. My first week was orientation, introductions, and getting familiar with the firm's existing client portfolio. But in the background, Brooke and I were quietly preparing the Callaway pitch. I knew that account better than anyone alive. I knew their brand voice, their customer profile, their seasonal patterns, and the exact language their director responded to. I also knew every mistake that had been made in the last 2 months. The pitch was scheduled for 3 weeks out. We had time, but not much. I worked the way I had always worked, early mornings, clear thinking, nothing wasted. What I didn't know yet was that on the same Monday I started at Lumen & Co., Vela Styles' corporate HR team had acknowledged receipt of my complaint and opened a formal investigation. I found out from Carla, who sent me a single text message that Tuesday evening. It said, "Things are very interesting here today." I smiled at my phone and put it face down on my desk. The investigation moved faster than I expected. From what Carla told me over the following 2 weeks, in careful, brief messages that I never asked her to send but was grateful for, the corporate HR team had come in quietly. They had requested access to files, email records, and presentation archives going back 2 years. They had interviewed several team members individually. Raymond apparently told people it was a routine audit. Most people nodded and went back to work. But Carla said the questions the investigators were asking were not routine. They were specific. They were asking about authorship of campaigns, about who attended which strategy sessions, about the timeline of my demotion relative to Brooke's visit. On the Thursday of that second week, Carla sent me a message that just said they talked to Donna. I read that and felt a long, slow breath leave my body. Donna had been in that original meeting. Donna had sat there while Raymond slid that paper across the table. Donna worked in HR and knew better than anyone what a falsified performance record looked like. Whether she had known it was falsified at the time, or simply chosen not to look closely, she knew now that someone above her had looked very closely. I sent Carla back a single word. Okay. Then I went back to the Callaway pitch deck and kept building. The Callaway pitch was on a Thursday. Brooke and I drove together. She wore a gray blazer and said very little on the way there, which I had come to understand was how she focused. I wore a navy dress I had bought specifically for this meeting, and I went over my notes one last time in the passenger seat. We were meeting with 3 people from Callaway's parent group, their brand director, their head of retail operations, and a woman named Paula, who was the executive that had signed off on the decision to look for external strategy support. We were one of 2 firms pitching that day. I led the presentation. I knew the moment I started talking that something in the room shifted. Not dramatically, not obviously, but Paula leaned forward slightly in the 3rd minute, and she didn't lean back. Their brand director started writing notes around the 8-minute mark. Their head of retail operations asked a clarifying question at the midpoint that told me he was engaged, not skeptical. When I finished, there was a pause. Paula looked at me. "You know this brand very well," she said. "I've had the privilege of working closely with it," I said carefully. She looked at Brooke, then back at me. "We'll be in touch by end of week," she said. We shook hands. We walked to the car. Brooke waited until we were both inside before she turned to me. "You just won that account," she said. "Callaway confirmed on Friday afternoon." Brooke forwarded me the email with no message. Just the email. I read it once, put my phone down on my desk, looked out of my window for about 30 seconds, and then went back to work. I know that sounds anticlimactic, but the confirmation didn't feel like a surprise. It felt like the natural result of everything I had done correctly over a very long and painful stretch of time. Celebration felt premature. There was still work to do. What I did allow myself, privately, was one quiet moment of acknowledgement. I thought about the version of me who had rebuilt the Callaway campaign at 2 in the morning 18 months earlier. The one who had sent it to Raymond at 6 a.m. and said, "Use this," and never asked for anything in return. The one who had convinced herself that doing good work quietly was enough. That version of me had been wrong about that specific thing. Good work done quietly, without protection or documentation or a seat at the right table, is just good work that belongs to whoever has the louder voice. But that version of me had also been the one who paid close enough attention to build something that couldn't be taken this time. I owed her something. I sent in a text that just said, "I got it." She replied with 3 words, "I knew it." 3 days after Callaway confirmed, Carla called me. Not a text. A call. That alone told me something significant had happened. I stepped out of the office and answered. "Raymond's been suspended," she said. I leaned against the wall in the hallway. "When?" I asked. "This morning. Corporate HR came in with someone from legal. They went into his office for 40 minutes. When they came out, he was gone. Security walked him to his car." I was quiet. "There's more," Carla said. "Apparently this wasn't the first time. There was a woman 2 years before you. Her name was Faye. She left suddenly, and everyone thought it was personal. Nobody asked questions. HR is apparently looking at her case now, too." I felt something move through me that I didn't have a clean word for. It wasn't satisfaction exactly. It was more like grief and relief at the same time. Grief that it had happened before. Relief that the pattern had finally been seen. "Carla," I said, "thank you for everything." "You did the work," she said simply. I just kept my eyes open. We stayed on the phone for a moment without speaking. Then she said, "The place is a mess without you, by the way." I almost laughed. "It'll find its footing," I said. "It always does." The call I didn't expect came on a Tuesday evening, 3 weeks after Raymond's suspension. I was at home making dinner when my phone rang. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer. Something made me pick up. It was Raymond. His voice was different. Quieter. All the smooth professional polish was gone, like a coat of paint scraped off to reveal what was underneath. What was underneath sounded like a man who had spent 3 weeks realizing exactly how much of his reputation had been borrowed from someone else. "Nora," he said, "I need to ask you something." I turned the stove down and waited. "I'm looking for new positions. Some people I've approached have reached out to Vela for references, and the situation there is," he paused. "It's complicated right now. I thought maybe you could speak to what we accomplished together. The Callaway account. The campaigns." I let the silence sit for a moment. "Raymond," I said, "we both know what I could speak to about those campaigns." He didn't say anything. I'm not going to lie for you, I said. And I'm not going to help dismantle what you built either, because to be honest, there isn't much left of it that was yours. But I'm not your enemy. I just can't be your solution. I heard him exhale slowly. I understand, he said. I hope things work out for you, I said. And I meant it the way you mean it when you finally stop being angry. Not warmly, but honestly. I hung up and stood in my kitchen for a while. Then I finished making dinner. Sasha called 2 days after Raymond. Her call was different. Less polished, more desperate. She had been demoted when the investigation surfaced evidence that she had passed information about my performance concerns to Raymond, information that had been used to construct the false performance record. She wasn't being terminated, but her role had been significantly reduced. The irony was not lost on either of us. She apologized, at length. She used the words, I didn't realize how bad it was, and I thought he was just managing the team. I listened to all of it. Then I said, I believe that you didn't understand the full picture. I also think you knew enough to have asked more questions than you did. She was quiet. I'm not holding on to this, I told her. But I can't give you what you're looking for either. What I can tell you is that you're talented enough to not need someone else's politics to survive. I hope you figure that out. I ended the call and sat with the quiet of my apartment. This is the part nobody tells you about when you imagine revenge. You imagine it feeling like a door slamming shut. Clean, final, loud. It doesn't feel like that. It feels like slowly setting down something very heavy that you have been carrying for so long you forgot it wasn't supposed to be yours to carry. 6 months after I started at Lumen & Co., we closed our second major retail account, a regional fashion brand called Harlow that had been struggling with brand identity for 2 years. I led the strategy. My name was on every document. Brooke promoted me to senior director at the 5-month mark. She didn't make a big announcement. She just updated my title, adjusted my contract, and sent me an email that said, You've already been doing this job. Now the paperwork matches. The Callaway partnership was going well. Better than well. Their summer campaign, the one I had designed from the ground up in my first weeks at Lumen, had outperformed their previous 2 years combined. Paula sent Brooke a note calling it the clearest articulation of our brand we've ever had in a campaign. I framed that email, not to show anyone, just for me. At Vela Style, Raymond's position was eventually filled by someone brought in from outside. The partnerships division had lost 2 accounts during the transition period and was being rebuilt from scratch. I heard this from Carla, who was still there and still keeping her eyes open. I didn't feel triumphant when I heard it. I felt the specific kind of sad you feel when something that could have been great is wasted. All those years, all that talent in that building, all of it dimmed because one man had been more afraid of being outshone than interested in building something real. I keep a photograph on my desk at Lumen & Company. It isn't anything dramatic. It's a picture of me and from a hiking trip we took the summer before I joined Vela Style. We're standing at the top of a trail, squinting into the sun, both of us slightly out of breath. We look happy and tired and completely unaware of everything that is about to happen. I keep it there because I want to remember who I was before all of it. Not the version who got demoted. Not the version who built the evidence folder. Not even the version who stood in that pitch room and won. The version who was just a woman with good instincts, real skills, and the quiet, stubborn belief that her work was worth something. She was right. She was always right. She just needed the right table. If there is anything I want someone to take from this story, it is not the revenge. It is not the investigation, or Raymond losing his job, or the phone calls that came after. Those things happened because they were always going to happen to a man who built his success on borrowed credit. What I want you to take is this. Your work has a signature, even when your name isn't on it. People who know the difference between real thinking and a good imitation will always find it eventually. Be patient. Be precise. Keep the receipts. And never, ever let someone else's fear of your ability convince you that you are smaller than you are. You are not smaller. You are just getting started.